Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nastaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavad Yuktamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki निगमकल्पतरोर्गलितं फलं शुकमुखादमृतद्रवसंयुतं पिबत भागवतं रसमालयं मुहुरहो रसिका भुवि भावुकाः ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमा ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभयश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयति गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्य ईश्वरम् हरि ओम तत्सत् ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय. So I'm very happy to be with all of you here today, and we would try to learn some wonderful instructions from this particular chapter. This is the 11th canto, General History, in which we will discuss from chapter number 2. In fact, the teachings of Narada to Vasudeva consists of 3 main chapters. So let me just share some points with you. And is it okay if I can request you to also read some of the slides in between? Is that normally agreed for all of you? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine, bro.
Right, thank you so much. So in general, we will see the chapter divisions of the teachings of Narada to Vasudeva, chapter 2 to 5. Chapter 2 is Maharaj Nimi meets the 9 Yogendras. That's a very significant chapter. Then liberation from the illusory energy as taught by the Nava-Yogendras. And chapter 4 discusses about specifically the question and answers of King Nimi, of which Drumida, one of the Nava-Yogendras, responds. And chapter 5 is a conclusion of teachings to Vasudeva. So I've tried to title this session today as Krishna's Holy Ambassadors on Pure Path, Advancing in Divine Connection and Knowledge. So you also see the first letter of each of these words are highlighted in yellow, golden yellow. Each of them are indicating a particular Navayogendra. So that's how we have titled this with an intention to bring about the essence of these ambassadors, the Yogendras, who show us the pure path and how do we progress in divine connection and with proper knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Broadly to speak, chapter 2 discusses on the following subject matter. Vasudeva's spiritual aspiration, which he puts forward in front of Narada. And the questions that Vasudeva asks in this chapter is about what is Bhagavata Dharma, and then how to seek freedom from Maya. And as a very curious father of Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he finds himself that there is a great need for him to understand this process of devotional service. Despite the good fortune, the most exalted situation that he has as being the father of Lord Sri Krishna, still he considers it is necessary for him to know about the devotional process. And then at this background, Narada, having arrived in Dwaraka, he gives some wonderful instructions, bringing some anecdotes from the previous histories that has taken place, where such a similar inquiry was made by Maharaj Nimi, and he had the good fortune to meet the Yogendras. These Yogendras were the sons of Rishabhadeva. The Rishabhadeva, the partial incarnation of the Supreme Lord, had 100 sons, of whom the eldest is Bharata Maharaj. About him, we hear a great story about him in Canto 5. And he had 100 children, so of which 9 became Yogendras, and then another 10 became great kings, and 81 of them became the Karmakandi Brahmanas to perform the various dharmic actions. So this canto specifically speaks about these holy personalities. They are on the same platform as Mahajanas, and how they bring about this great confidential knowledge in terms of those questions which have been related by uh, Vasudeva. So let's see what inquiries did Vasudeva make in this particular chapter. We can see them in the first 9 verses. So I would like to briefly read a verse and then we discuss more on this subject matter. Just give me a moment, please. I will share the screen with you. We will read from verse 2. Before that, a few translations can actually help us to get into the mood of this inquiry. Maharaj Nimi meets the 9 Yogendras. Text 1 says about Srila Shuka Uvacha. Sukadeva Goswami explains about this inquiry made by Vasudeva to Narada. Sri Sukha Uvacha Govinda Bhuja Guptayam Dwaravatyam Kurudvaha Avastin Narado Abhikshanam Krishnopashana Lalasa. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, eager to engage in the worship of Lord Krishna, O best of the Kurus, Narada Muni stayed for some time in Dwaraka, which was always protected by the arms of Govinda. So it's a very clear clarity. Later on, we'll also find it out that Narada was very anxious to be in the association of Lord Sri Krishna, who was now the Dwarakadisha. So he used to frequent this place, and while so frequenting, his intention was to somehow or the other be able to take the darshan of the Lord and also render some devotional service unto him. And we find here that Narada used to come to Dwaraka, and on one such occasion, Konurajan Indriyavan Mukunda Charanambhujam Na Bhajet Sarvato Mrityu Upasyam Amaruttama. My dear king, here it is referred to Maharaj Parikshit. In the material world, the conditioned souls are confronted by death at every step of life. Therefore, who among the conditioned souls would not render service to the lotus feet of Lord Mukunda, who is worshipable even for the greatest of liberated souls? The next verse speaks of Tam ekadatu dvare deva rishim vasudevo gruhagatam architam sukamasinam abhivadyem abravit. So Vasudeva received very respectfully Narada, and on one occasion, making him feel comfortable, he gave him a seat, offered some respectful words and some water, and going down to him, he inquired in the following ways. So here begins these questions. Sri Vasudeva Uvacha Bhagavan Bhavato Yatra Swastaye Sarvadehinam Rupananam Yatha Pitro Uttamasloka Vartmanam means the path. He is requesting Uttamasloka Vartmanam. Kindly tell me that path which leads to Uttamasloka, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he compares Narada and glorifies him with the word Bhagavan Bhavato Yatra. Wherever you are situated, the Supreme Lord also resides. Swastaye Sarvadehinam. And for the benefit of everyone, you wander around in this great world, in this transcendental body of yours. Krupananam Yatha Prito. Just for the sake of giving great love and affection, Pitror, like a father, you deal with all those who are miserly or those who have not got the benefit of being in the service of Lord Krishna. You are actually connecting them. This is the first offering that he gave to Narada. Bhutanam devacharitam dukkhaya sa cha sukaya cha sukaiva hi sadhunam tvadrisham achyutatmanam. The activities of demigods lead to both misery and happiness for living beings, but the activities of great saints like you, who have accepted the infallible Lord as their very soul, result only in the happiness of all beings. So, Vasudeva is also setting a standard how to receive a great personality such as Narada. First of all, he stated that wherever you reside, and you always give directions of Uttama Sloka Vartaya. And why do you do so? Because you are very affectionate, like a fatherly affection unto those who are wretched, who are bereft. And in this verse, he says, very interestingly, comparing the celestial beings, such as the Devas, he is Devarishi, Narada. So compared to the other Devas, Bhutanam Devacharitam, for the sake of spreading the glories and the message of the celestial personalities, you come into this material world. And the purpose of your coming here is Dukkhaya cha Sukhaya cha. For those who are in misery, you try to give them happiness. Because only worshipping the demigods without the clarity of understanding the real position will not help them to become free from happiness or misery. Sukha yaya iva hi sadhunam. But what kind of a sukha that you give, the pleasure that you give, is that which is transcendental. And twadrisham achyutatmanam. So achyutatmanam refers to those personalities whose body, mind, and soul is filled with the consciousness of Achyuta. that Supreme Lord who never falls down from his position. So another glory, Vasudeva so speaks. So I would read briefly from the purport and then we will try to take some interesting points here. This verse clearly states that the pure devotees of the Lord, such as Narada Muni, are saintly persons to be considered superior, even to the demigods, the living beings, empowered by the Supreme Lord to administer the entire universe. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 3:12, Ishtan bhogan hivo deva dasyante yagna bhavita tair dattan apradhyayibhyo yo bhuktaye stenase eva saha. So those who simply uh, take advantage of the benefits given by the demigods, but if they do not serve them, dasyante yagna bhavita, by not offering proper respects to them and only taking the benefits without appropriate values that could be offered against, will be only considered as yo bhunte stena eva saha, as considered to be as simply thieves. So enjoys these gifts without offering them in the return to the demigod is certainly a thief. So here, but what can be given as something in response or in respect to what the sadhus give, whose benedictions and whose benefits that are awarded to the common men cannot be compared to that of the demigods. So therefore, Vasudeva, with great respect, he says that there can be nothing that can be offered to you other than simply hearing from you the great instructions. As stated here, however, great saintly persons such as Narada Muni are always merciful to all living beings. Titikshvaha, Karunika, Sukhrida Sarvadehinam, Ajata Shatruvashantaha, Sadhavaha, Sadhu Bhushana. So the qualities of a great personalities are described in this verse from the third canto. Srila Prabhupada in his commentary on this verse has portrayed the sadhu as follows. As described above is a devotee of the Lord. His concern, therefore, is to enlighten people in devotional service to the Lord. Uttama Loka, Uttama Sloka Vartaya. That is called his mercy. He knows that without devotional service to the Lord, human life is spoiled, and a devotee travels all over the country, door to door, preaching. Be Krishna conscious. Be a devotee of Lord Krishna. Don't spoil your life in simply fulfilling your animal propensities. Human life is meant for self-realization or Krishna consciousness. These are the preachings of a sadhu. So Vasudeva, having realized the greatness of Narada Muni, therefore proposes and requests him to kindly enlighten him on this process of devotional service. Srila Prabhupada in this purport quotes the merciful nature of Lord Jesus Christ, who sacrificed himself but gave the message of love and mercy upon all other living entities. Similarly, Haridas Thakura, even though he was caned in 22 marketplaces and as a principal assistant to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gave and spread this mission of giving love and affection to everyone. Despite someone ill-treating him or befriending him, they would not make any difference in their approach towards the others. It is a difference in their behavior. A sadhu behaves with all conditioned souls for their ultimate relief from material entanglement. Therefore, no one can be more friendly than the sadhu in relieving a conditioned soul. So the purpose of the inquiry made by Vasudeva is to tell that, oh my dear sadhu Narada, you are here to relieve the suffering of the conditioned soul. So may I place in front of you some important inquiries. In the other text also, he compares Narada with Sadhavo Deenavatsala. You are very, very merciful to those who are fallen. And he further goes on to say an interesting point here in the next verse. Brahmams tathapi prichhamo dharman bhagavatam stava. O Brahmana, I would like to request you to speak Prapuchamo Dharmam. What is the real religious principles of which is called as Bhagavata Dharma, Bhagavatam Stava. So, what kind of a religious principles do the Bhagavatan, those who are merciful sadhus, conduct? Yen Srutva, I would like to hear that. And so, what will I get by hearing? Sraddhaya Martyo. For those for whom death is destined, if they hear you with great faith, muchyate, they become free from such kind of a danger. Sarvato bhayat. So, what follows the fear is death. And if there is no question of death occurring, there is no question of fear also coming in one's life. So, two important things that get resolved in a material condition life is that of fear and death. How is that? By practicing Bhagavata Dharma and making an appropriate inquiry in this relationship. So that's how the chapter goes on. So let me share with you some very interesting analysis of this chapter, which gives us some interesting insights. So we saw the related inquiry made by Vasudeva to Narada Muni, and that can be broadly classified as he had a great desire for devotional knowledge. This is Sukadeva Goswami introducing the chapter. And then between 4 to 9, Vasudeva is speaking about fearlessness in devotion. Vasudeva asks how to overcome material illusion and attain freedom from fear through devotional service. And then requests for a clarity on duties pleasing to Krishna in verse 7. Vasudeva requests a clear explanation of duties that secure liberation and simultaneously satisfy the Supreme Lord. Then he asks or he condemns himself that in the past I did not take advantage of this devotional service. Even though he was already in an exalted position, he still says this. Confesses his regret for previously seeking material blessings rather than liberation. As we all know that Vasudeva and Devaki had performed several austerities and for a great long time. And after which, when the time of giving or receiving benedictions came, they simply asked the Lord that may they get a son like him. There is no one who is like him. So the Lord had to come himself to fulfill those desires. And he says that desire was just to have you as a Lord, as a son. And Vasudeva considers even that was totally material. Instead, he could have asked, "Oh, my dear Lord, give me and award me liberation," because he had performed such kind of a great austerity. So he regrets that he did not use that opportunity to seek liberation. Therefore, now he becomes even more inquisitive that Narada, who is the master of this yogic science, can tell him and free him from these clutches of Maya. Therefore, the next part that he asks is the seeking the method to conquer Maya. Vasudeva inquires about the process to overcome Maya and become established in pure devotion service. So further to this, we can see Narada's response. He brings in the reference of the Navayogendras in this chapter, each one of them giving certain instructions to Maharaj Nimi according to his various inquiries. We will also see later in this slide today what were the kind of inquiries made by King Nimi and how each of the Navayogendras are also briefly explaining and giving response to his inquiries. Would anyone of you like to read this slide if you are comfortable?
Yes, sure, Prabhuji. I can read it.
Please.
I can read it.
Narada's response, a dialogue of King Me and the 9 Yogendras. Narada recognizes Vasudeva's sincerity and in response narrates the ancient dialogue between King Nimi and the 9 Yogendras, sons of Lord Rishabdev. Through this dialogue, Narada presents teachings on Bhagavad Dharma from the enlightened Yogendras, each of whom embodies high spiritual realization and perspectives on devotion. This historical discussion allows Narada to address Vasudeva's inquiries in a comprehensive and authoritative manner, covering the topic of the fearless devotion, liberation, overcoming Maya, and the role of the Guru. Through the enlightened teachings of the Yogendra to King Nimi.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for that. So the basic discussion that actually took place is referred in these discussions, saying that one time in the history, there were these Yogendras who, on their own accord, appeared in the court of King Nimi, and based upon the inquiry made by King Nimi, they answered one by one those questions, which is exactly the way how Vasudeva is placing his inquiry in front of Narada. So here is the names of these Nava Yogendras, and they are the holy ambassadors: Kavi, Havir, Antariksha, Prabuddha, Pipalayana, Avirhotra, Drumila, Chamasa, Karabhajana. So these Nava Yogendras give certain responses based on the inquiries made by King Nimi. So about a little brief on the story of King Nimi and the Nava Yogendras, we see here in the verses 10 to 14. The context is Narada, pleased with Vasudeva's devotion, introduces the historic dialogue of King Nimi with Nava Yogendras. This example sets the stage for profound teachings on pure devotion. And the significance is Narada emphasizes the importance of bhakti as the path to ultimate purification, and also answers Vasudeva's inquiry, which was previously referred by the Nava Yogendras. And then introduction of Rishabhadeva's lineage. So who are these Nava Yogendras? So there is an introduction to that. And Narada outlines Rishabhadeva's lineage, which you must have all also previously read in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavat. Particularly the role of the saintly sons, the Nava Yogendras, who embody fearless devotion and detachment from material life. So Rishabhadeva's story is in the 5th canto, and his first son, Bharata Maharaj's story, is also in the 5th canto. But then the later sons, such as these Nava Yogendras and that of the other Karmakandi Brahmanas, we will find them in the 11th canto. So initially it was only the Bharata Maharaj's story that we hear in this section. So here the significance is the Vasudeva is introduced to the exemplary lives of Yogendras, whose devotion illustrates the answer to the quest for fearlessness. As you may also recall, in the Bhagavad Gita, the 16th chapter, the very first verse, Lord Krishna says, what is the benefit of performing devotional service? Abhayam sattva samshuddhi. Automatically one becomes fearless when he takes up to the path of devotional service. Vasudeva also inquired, what is that fearless method by which one can connect themselves to Krishna consciousness? Then we will see in this section, between 24 to 43, we have two teachers, such as Kavi and Havir, who are responding to the questions of the inquiry from Nava Yogendras. They are the teachings, what we refer to them as path to fearlessness and devotional levels. King Nimi's inquiry was generally to the Nava Yogendras, but they methodologically, or they followed a kind of a reverence, who is going to answer which type of a question. So the first question is answered by Kavi, one of the Navayogendras, or one of the eldest of the Yogendras. King Nimi, in reverence to the Yogendras, seeks the supreme good for the soul. Kavi explains that fearlessness comes by dedicating one's life to Lord Narayana, addressing Vasudeva's desire to overcome fear through devotion. And I would like to read this verse. It's a very interesting verse and it has a great significance. We are talking from the 11th chapter, 11 to 32 to 33. So that's where the solution for fearlessness is given. So let me just recall that verse and share it with you. And I believe you must be also have heard this verse, which is very famous and oftentimes quoted also. Sri Narada Uvacha. Let me share the screen. एवं ते निम्न पृष्ठा वासुदेव महात्मना प्रतिपूज्या ब्रुवान प्रीत्य सा सद्यस्त्रिभजं नृपम्. So what was Narada's response to this? O Vasudeva, when Maharaj Nimi had thus inquired from Navayogendras about devotional service to the Lord, those best of saintly persons sincerely thanked the king for his questions and spoke to him with affection in the presence of the members of the sacrificial assembly and the Brahmana priests. So he says, Kabir Uvacha, Manye kutaschid bhayam achyutasya padmambujopasanam atra nityam udvigna buddhe asadatma bhava vishwatmana yatra nivartate bhi. The word bhi refers to bhaya or fear, and it's also used kutaschid bhayam. Bibhyate, the word is used representing fear. He says, I consider that one whose intelligence is constantly disturbed by his falsely identifying himself with the temporary material world can achieve real freedom from fear only by worshipping the lotus feet of the infallible Supreme Lord. In such devotional service, all fear ceases entirely. Also elsewhere in the Bhagavatam, it is also mentioned, Bhayam dvitiya viniveshesya ishadapetasya. So those who are actually devoted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they consider that as their primary duty. But whereas those whose intelligence is diverse, they think other than the Supreme Lord to be the most important aspect in their lives. Whenever there is a disconnection to the Supreme Lord, the first result of that is always fear. Therefore, bhayam dvitiya abhinivesha syat. So it is dvitiya, it is not prathama. For those lives which is prathama is Krishna, then there is no bhaya. It is only abhaya. Therefore, is also called as abhaya charana-aravinda. So that's the perspective that Kavi is presenting his point. Also in this purport, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati quotes a very interesting verse. Tavad bhayam dravina deha sukhrun nimittam shokaspruha paribhavo vipluchascha lobha tavan mameti asad avargraha artimulam yavan nate angrim abhayam pravranita loka. O my Lord, the people of the world are embarrassed by all material anxieties. They're always afraid. They always try to protect wealth, body, friends. They're all filled with lamentation and unlawful desires and paraphernalia. And they avariciously base their undertakings on the perishable conception of I and mine. Whenever there is this conception of I and mine, whenever and wherever, then automatically what happens is bhayam. Because you need to protect them. So unless and until we are free from this concept, then there's no question of becoming free from bhaya. So stating, let's see the further inquiry. Then Havir teaches on the levels of devotion. That's the next question asked. Havir, the second Yogendra, describes the three types of devotees, which is Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttama, neophyte, intermediate, and advanced, based on their perception of the Lord in all beings. And he provides Vasudeva with an understanding of progressive devotion, showing how seeing Krishna everywhere leads to fearless bhakti. Since we are trying to summarize this chapter, so I'm not taking every single verse to give you an insight, but overall, the descriptions is what we will talk over here. So, the philosophical points from this section between 1 to 3, we get at least two. Seeking shelter of Krishna as the highest purpose, which Sukadeva Goswami reiterates. And then Dwaraka as a place of divine protection. Therefore, Narada keeps visiting this place. And even in the 11th canto also, later in the, even in the 10th canto, the almost like the concluding chapter, 89th chapter, there is also a very beautiful sloka which says about the protection given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to all the inhabitants of Dwaraka. Jayati Jananivaso Devaki Janmavado Yaduvar Parishad Swer Dhorbin Asyan Adharmam Stirachara Vrgnagna Sushmita Sri Mukhena Vrajapura Vanitanam Vardhayan Kamadevan. How the Lord with his Dorbhir, with his great two arms, protects all the Dwarakavasis. So the protection is experienced in Dwaraka. Dwaraka, being under the protection of Krishna's arms, is free from material influences such as curses or the binding effects of karma. This serves as a metaphor for how devotees are protected from the effects of Maya by residing in Krishna's presence. So one can be in a dham, one can bring Krishna to his home, establish him in the form of a Shaligrama Shila or the deity forms and worship him with all kinds of paraphernalia possible, and therefore become free, feeling the presence of Krishna. Wherever there is Krishna, there is no question of Maya at all. So either physically or mentally through devotion, Narada's presence in Dwaraka, despite his curse to wander, illustrates the divine protection Krishna extends to his devotees, transcending material restriction. Narada was cursed by Daksha, as we see this in the 4th canto. When 4th and 5th cantos, we would say, when Narada tried to persuade all the sons, first the 10,000 sons, first the 60,000 sons, then the 10,000 sons, and then the 1,000 sons. In this way, he persuaded them to take the path of bhakti, which caused severe distress to Daksha. And therefore he cursed him that he will never stay in any one single place. If we try to see and analyze some challenges, we can also see here that the allure of material life and sensory pleasures often distracts individuals from pursuing devotion to Krishna. Those who prioritize sense gratification over spiritual goals end up entangled in cycles of karma and suffering. So what kind of a resolution can be thought in terms of how to become free from such karmic actions? We see here, first of all, recognize that this world is temporary in its nature, and the material pleasures that it offers is also very much temporary. And what we see here in this material world is mrityu, the death everywhere. Sarvato mrityuhu. One can shift their focus to Krishna when association grants liberation and eternal bliss. Then some lessons for the sadhakas who are practicing devotional service. Appreciate the importance of devotional service. Then express one's gratitude for being able to perform spiritual life and realizing the temporary material life and take precautions not to entangle. This could be some important lessons for a sadhaka. Then between text 4 to 9, the role of pure devotee as the ultimate guide. Since Vasudeva took shelter of Narada, who is an embodiment of devotional service. He accepted him as his guru and guide, and therefore he could recognize the potency of spiritual path. And then the practice itself, basically to overcome the fear. Bhakti is the true solution to fear. Vasudeva's inquiry and centers on the teachings of the Bhagavad Dharma as the path of freedom from all fear. In this way, it underlines that fear stems from seeing anything as separate from Krishna. By engaging in bhakti, one achieves a fearless state, seeing everything as connected to and governed by Krishna. Just as Rupa Goswami also tells this in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nirbhande Krishna Sambhande. Bandhana takes place in this material world. As also Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Karmana Anyatro. If one does not perform the devotional service, then what happens? It is karma bandhana. Immediately, one is put into this bondage. Therefore, bhakti thus transforms one's consciousness, allowing them to transcend the anxiety and instability of material life. I would now take you to the next section here. Narada's response and introduction to the story of King Nimi. We just had read some few verses there. So he first of all speaks about the glorification of such a devotional inquiry made by Vasudeva. He becomes very delighted. And then he introduces what is called as Bhagavat Dharma, which was discussed between King Nimi and the Yogendras. He draws our attention to this historical narrative which had taken place long back. This could be said at the end of the Satya Yuga and the beginning of the Treta Yuga. These discussions took place between King Nimi and these Navayogendras. So I would like to read the second point here. How immediate purification through Bhagavad Dharma is possible. Bhagavad Dharma is so potent that even simply hearing, chanting or meditating on it can immediately purify even the most sinful souls. We have great examples for this. How Ajamila was purified even though he chanted it, not with the intention to actually call upon the Supreme Lord, because out of his affection towards his child. But because it was done offenselessly, the name has the potency to deliver. Therefore, Bhagavat Dharma teaches us how to engage oneself in the process of devotional service. This process surpasses other spiritual paths as it is based on the pure love and service to the Supreme Lord rather than selfish desires or expectations of reward. The jnana, karma or yoga processes takes us with some kind of a motives, such as to become liberated or to get the heavenly planets or to become merged into the Lord's effulgence. But whereas bhakti gives us an opportunity to directly render service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this unique power of bhakti is celebrated as a means for all beings, regardless of background, to transcend impurities and experience divine love. In this section, we can see some lessons and also a challenge. Would one of you like to read a challenge? Another one can pick up a lesson. Any one of these lessons, please.
I can read, Prabhuji.
Please.
Challenge. There exists skepticism regarding the legitimacy of historical narratives found in texts like the Srimad Bhagavatam, which some may dismiss as myth or allegory. Resolution also, Prabhuji?
Yeah, please.
Resolution. Narada refers to the narration of King Nimi and the Navayogendras as an itihasa, historical account, emphasizing its authenticity and transcendental nature. By affirming the Bhagavatam's narratives as a true historical historical
events.
Narada clarifies that such histories are not mythical, but rather such sources of eternal wisdom and guidance. These accounts not only teach but also transform those who hear them, connecting them directly to the supreme truth.
So one can question here, why does Narada not directly speak, but why does he try to take a reference from something that happened in the history? The point is, he wants to prove if he would simply position himself to speak something, then there can be questions raised about its authenticity. But whereas when a historical narrative is brought forward, which is documented, then it becomes an authoritative presentation. Therefore, he brings in, even though the inquiry was the same, but he brings in these discussions backed up by an authority. So scriptures, as we say, Guru Sadhu Shastra is so important. So he establishes that principle. So he's walking the talk. And the lessons I would like to pick up here is the power of association with Bhagavata Dharma. Associating with Bhagavat Bhakti through hearing, chanting, or contemplating the lives of pure devotees has an immediate and transformative effect. Even for those with sinful tendencies. We have a great example. Haridas Thakur was really put into a challenge when this Vaishya Stri, the prostitute, approached him with an intention to seduce him and entice him. But Haridas Thakur was so fixed up in his devotional service, he said, I have actually taken a vow that I would chant so many names of the Lord. As soon as I finish this, then I can actually fulfill your desire. And he asked, till the time I complete my vow, why don't you actually offer your worship to Tulsi Maharani, sit in front of this wonderful divine plant, and hear what I'm chanting, and if possible, just repeat Hari Hari. So she just took it initially as a kind of let me try it out. But as she became absorbed in hearing the chanting which was being done by Haridas Thakur, she became so much absorbed that she had no external consciousness. And in no time, the names had the effect because it was a sincere hearing without any offenses. It took its effect and she became another personality who became so much worshipable. Even though she came from such kind of a background, she came from such kind of ill intentions, because she had the association of the pure holy name chanted from the mouth of a pure devotee, that gave the strength for her purification. So this teaches sadhakas that steadfast engagement with bhakti purifies the heart and brings them closer to Krishna. In this way, Narada is emphasizing how devotional service is very, very important. Then he gives a brief introduction to the Navayogendras, stating that they were the sons of Lord Rishabhadeva. And all the Navayogendras, the speciality was that they had a unified vision of the divine. Each one of them were very specifically self-realized in various perspectives of the Shastra Gyan. And therefore, they were the authorities to clarify various doubts in this connection. And then their recognition is expressed through the appreciation that they gave in terms of the creation and the creator and the created, all the three aspects of creation. By recognizing all creation as an extension of the Lord's energy, devotees are urged to treat the world with reverence, unity, and purpose. So nothing appears in this material world just like that. There is a purpose for that. There is a connection. So that was very nicely expressed by Narada, and he gives the relationship of how this was explained by the Yogendras. Now we directly read some wonderful philosophical points between the verses 24 to 31. Yeah. Two devotees can pick up from any of these two or any of the four that is given here, any two. Each devotee can pick up one each.
I can go, Prabhuji.
Please.
Philosophical points. Recognition of pure devotees. King Nimi's recognition and worship of the Nava Yogendras as exalted, self-realized souls indicates his deep understanding of bhakti etiquette. He understood that pure devotees fully devoted to Narayana are embodiments of divine qualities, and by honoring them, one honors the Supreme Lord Himself. The term Yadatha in 11.2.26 highlights the importance of proper etiquette in worshipping pure devotees, which reveals the Bhakti tradition's emphasis on serving the Lord through his devotees.
Thank you, Mataji. Okay, if
Num-
anyone want to read this, Daman?
Number 2, the supreme value of devotee association. Nimi values the association of the Nava-Yogendras as more valuable than even human life itself, understanding that even a moment of such association, Cassandra, can bring great spiritual treasure and enlightenment. This view underlines that bhakti belief that association with true devotees can fast-track one's progress, purifying the heart and bringing the practitioner closer to liberation.
Thank you. We'll see some more interesting points here in the text between 31 to 43. Some very significant lessons. Kavi's teachings on fearlessness through Bhagavat Dharma. Integrate devotion into every action. Constant dedication of one's actions to Narayana transforms daily life into spiritual practice, encouraging a sense of continuous surrender. I'm sure all of you are making your very best efforts to integrate devotion in your daily life. Then recognizing the illusory nature of fear. And why? Because there is a disconnect. Fear and material concerns dissolve when a devotee identifies with the eternal rather than the temporary. So that's a transitional state in which one can practice and become more and more enthused. Embrace bhakti as a self-sufficient path. The potency of bhakti is such that it does not require one to meet conditions typically necessary in other spiritual paths, such as advanced knowledge or strict ritualistic practice. So bhakti is more flexible, more adaptable, and more tangible. Then develop detachment with bhakti. Genuine devotion, engagement naturally reduces the attachment to material life because you become very practical, encouraging a state of peace and contentment, and revere the world as the Lord's expansion. In fact, the whole teachings of Navayogendras is on this point number 5. One is able to see the connection in every perspective of how the Lord's significance and his presence can be felt. When one evolves in his consciousness to this, then it becomes very easy for him to appreciate and relate. Respecting all of creation as connected to the Lord fosters an attitude of reverence and humility, diminishing the urge for material possessions. All of this has been told with respect to how to become fearlessness, how to gain the fearlessness in bhakti. Between text 44 to 55, this is about Havir, the second Navayogendra, his teachings on the levels of devotion. Specifically, it speaks about 3 kinds of devotees, and within the devotional service also, different types of devotional services one can pursue. Uttama Bhagavata's vision, interaction with his beings and worship and interaction, acceptance of dualities, detachment from body and mind, and freedom from ego are discussed between verses 45 to 55. Let me request one of you to just pick up any one of this as we are running closer to the time. So you can read any one of this, please. Then I have some 2 interesting slides to show you.
I will go, Prabhuji, actually.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Freedom from ego. The higher devotee is devoid of pride stemming from birth, knowledge, or any social or religious status. His humility and identity as Krishna's servant keep him aloof from false ego.
So the point here is how to get rid of all these qualities. Identify very strongly that one is a servant of Krishna or the servant of Krishna. Because false ego is the seed for all kinds of deterioration in one's life or in one's bhakti. A quick summary of the entire section, what we heard now. the Yogendras, each one of them are specifically pointed out here. What was their summarized chapters or the sections which they have taught to King Nimi? On the Bhagavata Dharma, Kavi, he spoke Bhagavata Dharma as the supreme path of pure devotional service, freeing the soul from fear and material bondage. That was his lessons. Then the degrees of devotion spoken by Havir, levels of devotees, neophyte, intermediate, and advanced, based on their qualities and perception of the Lord. This is a very interesting point. Perception of the Lord changes according to the position of a particular devotee and his practice. Then Antariksha, he talks about the mechanics of Maya, how Maya can become alluring and how it binds the soul and how illusion can actually takes over and gives them a false bodily identification, was elaborately spoken by Antariksha. And Prabuddha spoke on the role of Guru and Sangha in overcoming Maya, emphasizes need for a Guru and devotee association to purify the heart and transcend Maya. Then Pippalayana, he describes the Lord as all-pervading and transcendental, enabling devotees to be free from material illusion. And the topic that he discussed was nature of the Supreme Lord. So Bhagavata Dharma is very specifically categorized and put across and against each of these wonderful Navayogendras. Avirhotra speaks of the path of Karma Yoga. So in the Bhagavatam itself, you find karma, you find jnana, you find yoga, and also you find bhakti. So all of these are presented so that one can clearly distinguish difference between the bhakti and that of the other processes, and establishing bhakti as the supreme or the highest. So therefore, each of these Navayogendras brings forward those perspectives, how those karma yoga, jnana, or the other paths are important as a stepping stones to come to the bhakti marga. So typically it is like a Bhagavad Gita teachings, but in a very subtle and succinct manner. He outlines karma yoga as offering results to the Supreme Lord, leading to liberation, and Dhrumila, incarnations of the Supreme Lord, describes the various incarnations of the Lord, including Narayana, Hamsa, Kalki, and their purposes. And Chamasa, he destines of non-devotees, destinies of non-devotees, which is basically the descriptions described in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam about hellish planets and other things. Explains karmic consequences for non-devotees who neglect or disrespect the Supreme Lord. And Karabhajana, Lord's forms in different yugas, specifically his colors, forms, methods of worship, and across the 4 yugas, emphasizing Sankirtana in the Kali Yuga as an important. This is in the 5th canto, 5th chapter of this section, in which also there's a description of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, also of Lord Sri Ramachandra and Lord Sri Krishna, all in those brief verses. Then some other perspective that we can see here is in the entirety of this section here. Vasudeva's inquiry, King Nimi's corresponding question, then Yogendra's response, which particular Yogendra, and where we can find this chapter and text reference on this. So I will just pick up 1 or 2 here for your benefit. Let me pick up the 3rd inquiry of Vasudeva. Overcoming Maya, how can materialists cross Maya's influence? And the response is, the question is asked by Nimi, how can even materialists overcome Maya? And the answer is given by Prabuddha. He teaches the importance of Guru, Sangha, and pure devotional service. And this can be found in chapter 3, text 1 to 17, inquiries by Nimi, and text 18 to 33, Prabuddha's response. So I hope that this was a kind of a brief overview of this chapter, because it's a very, very deep philosophical subject matter. I might not be able to cover in a very short time, but still I made what best I could do. So if there are any shortcomings, kindly please forgive me, and you're welcome to say some comments or help me to improve. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Go ahead with any questions anyone has. questions. Thank you very much, Prabhu, for detailedly summarizing Narada's teachings of Vasudeva.
Hare Krishna.
How to become fearless with the intensity of devotion service to Guru and Sadhu and Shastra. Thank you. And Vasudeva himself is teaching us, even though he is expert in it, but he's teaching us how to act humbly and learn the lessons, not repeat. Thank you. Thank you for your kind association and bringing
Thank
us
you.
the essential teachings in this summary study.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for giving this opportunity. It's also an attempt for me to become more purified and focused. And in your service and in your association, I felt very happy. Thank you so much.
No other questions, we'll do the announcements and we'll wrap it up. Okay, looks like no other questions. Thank you, Prabhu.
Most welcome. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyavacha.
Devachi.
Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo
Vishnu
namah.
Bono.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Shri
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
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 Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Jai Guru Sitanath Premananda. Hari Hari.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So please join today evening for Sunday Feast program, 5:30 to 9 p.m. And upcoming festival is December 11th. Wednesday is Gita Jayanti. If you haven't sponsored your chapter for Bhagavad Gita's box, please sponsor a chapter if you like to. Let us know. You can message us, one of us. So that will be in the evening because it's weekday, 7 to 9 or 6:30 to 9 p.m. Please try to come early so that you can join. If you cannot pronounce all the verses, at least you can hear the attention. 700 plus verses, once a year opportunity to chant, to hear, to be in that association, the transcendental message of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. So let us be there, try to be there in that association and take the opportunity. Most important festival. December 18th is Bhakti Siddhanta Thakur Goswami's Tirobhav, Disappearance Day, is another important day in this holy month. These two dates are very important, 11th and 18th. Both are Wednesdays, big day. So distribute books, as many books as possible, at least minimum one book to 30 plus books. If you don't have books, please contact us, pick it up from the temple. So let us increase the book marathon scores for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada and our Parampara Acharyas. Prahat Mridanga ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai. So those are the quick announcements. Anything else, Madhubha Prabhu may not be there. Okay, we'll conclude then. Thank you very much for your association. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna. Hare
Thank you.
Hare
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.